That was really insightful. I'll make one comment, and then I have one question, and then we'll sort of move through some of the other questions that we received. But you were talking about the Provincial Research Station, the Agricultural Research Center that we have.
Yep.
I did not realize that the decision had been changed to leave that here in our community. The last thing I had seen in the news was that it was moving to the Olds College campus and it was leaving our community. And so I found that really interesting that
well, unless there's been anything new, to my knowledge, it's staying.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. The article I saw was probably well, several months ago for sure. It could have even been the end of 2020.
Yeah, there was some fear that that would happen, but I was fairly vocal with the minister that it needed to stay here, and they didn't move it. So I will admit, though, it's reduced staff levels.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. One of the questions was about tourism, and I think in recent years tourism has definitely become a lot more at the forefront. People realize how much of a driver it is for the economy, both domestic and people coming in from other places. And we had a webinar. Our Alberta Chamber of Commerce Network hosted a webinar last week with 3 Alberta tourism representatives. And they were saying that the tourism industry in Alberta is almost $9 billion annually. And that 6 of that is domestic. So that's Canadians traveling to Alberta. And so even if you look at, between now and the fall, or now and the end of 2021, of that 6 billion within Canada, I mean, you could probably guesstimate that maybe 2 million of that is Albertans traveling in Alberta. And the New Brunswick government put into place a bit of a rebate system last year. And so residents of New Brunswick could submit receipts up to $1,000, and they would receive a 20% rebate for travel that was done within the province. And it had to include at least one overnight. So I thought that was kind of an interesting strategy to encourage local people to spend their money within the community, within their provincial community, and not restricting it to, the resort towns, but open it up to anywhere in the province and just kind of get some of that money circulating here locally. So I was just curious if that's something that that the Alberta government knew about. Did you see that New Brunswick had brought that in? Is that something that you're considering, or are there other avenues that you're looking at to better support our Alberta tourism-based businesses that are, most of them are hospitality related, and they are one of the hardest hit industries?
Yeah, so I can make a couple of comments there. I hadn't heard about the did you say New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, whichever it was?
New Brunswick, yeah.
Brunswick thing until now, but it's certainly something I can pass on. But historically, you're right on those statistical numbers. The majority of tourism is actually usually somewhat local. It's and it gets included in things like baseball tournaments come to Lacombe, and all the people stay here, and all of those kind of things happen. So the big bulk of tourism money is always local in every jurisdiction. In Alberta, we sometimes don't celebrate that as much as we should. Banff and Kananaskis, or Kananaskis and Canmore have such a high profile that too much of the government is focused on that, and they depend more on some of the foreign stuff. But I would say for our riding, definitely businesses should focus on some of that local tourism, because you know what, people are tired of being locked up. They want something to do. If you can find a way to do it that will be safe for them, they will do that. And I've said this before, Lacombe-Ponoka riding, Blackfalds included, should really be cognizant to have on their radar the fact that just an hour north of us we've got 1 million plus people who are locked up in that city and wanting something to do. And if local people here could offer them an hour drive and something to do and a bit of an escape, they will come. It's just going to take some careful marketing and some coordinated effort. But I think that's a key piece for us. But the idea, I'll pass it on. Sure, I have not heard any discussion about that here in Alberta yet, so I don't know if anybody's even aware of it.
Yeah, fair enough. So totally switching gears. One of the other questions we had submitted was about carbon tax, which has definitely been a popular topic in the last few weeks. And so this question, what's that?
I said, that's a gracious word to call it popular.
Popular, yeah. Well, common, maybe, let's call it. So the question specifically is about a rebate for small business on carbon tax. And the example that was given to me about the cost of carbon tax for this small business for the 2021 year was astronomical. And it sort of left me reeling. And so if that's just one example, I can't imagine, the rest of the businesses that are in that position where they're thinking, how am I going to pay this?
Yeah, so it's a complicated subject. What we won't touch the industrial side of it because that's not the question. We're talking about the retail carbon tax only. And currently, of course, it's a federal game. So that request would have to go to the feds. But I will say that it is something that we want to hear the question because we really are going to have to wrestle with what is the better choice for Alberta. Should Alberta work with the feds and take it over and turn it back into a provincial carbon tax, or should we leave it with the feds? And the ultimate deciding factor has to be what is the best for retail Albertans versus the heavy industrial emitters, which is a totally different system. This question has certainly come up with regards to agriculture. I know that there's some lobbying with regards to agricultural producers, which are 90% all businesses, trying to lobby the feds to take that under advisement. So far, it hasn't worked. But ultimately for Alberta, the answer to the question will have to depend on whether or not we take it over ourselves or whether we stay where we're at and say you have to talk to the feds.
Yeah, fair enough.
And if you have opinions, if the chambers of Alberta want to make submissions to whether or not we should take it over as a provincial thing or leave it as federal, I'm sure that we would welcome any submissions you can provide. So.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Ron. So I'm going to read this question. The cost of mental health is a huge strain on employees and employers. Current access to mental health resources is lacking. Current pandemic has increased the strain on our already limited options. What does the provincial government plan to increase mental health resources? And I think that doesn't just mean call centers and things like that. It's removing barriers, cost barriers for actual counseling sessions with licensed professionals and those kinds of resources. What can we do there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I couldn't agree more that mental health is a challenge. I've raised this a number of times, and quite frankly, that has been some of my lobbying efforts with my own government to try and address the costs that people are experiencing in terms of mental health, life, not just business, but all of the rest of it. The government has made some significant efforts to try and address that, partly by appointing an associate minister of mental health and addictions. One of the challenges that he faced early on is that the health officials, when they shut everything down in the spring of last year, also shut down, for instance, the support groups, AA and Narcotics Anonymous and all these different groups. And he went to bat on that one and got it so that they could at least meet virtually. But there are huge problems in this area, and I actually just had a meeting 2 weeks ago with Associate Minister Luan, Mental Health, and I just shared with him some of the letters I've received from people. Just tragic letters. I have a letter from a single mom in Blackfalds who lost 10 years of savings in her home because she was locked out of her job. It was shut down. She couldn't go back to work. She got so far behind in her mortgage that she lost her house. Like, how do you measure that kind of loss and the long-term impacts of it? And families with seniors who have been essentially in solitary confinement. Now, fortunately, we've resolved some of that. Even yesterday, there was a new announcement opening the possibility of a few more visitors there. One of our MLAs in Calgary has lobbied continually with regards to children and the trauma that they're experiencing through some of the lockdown experiences that are being forced on them. So, and I'm not saying that some of these things shouldn't have happened. I'm just saying that the costs associated are huge. So it's something we're aware of, something that continually gets brought forward to the government, something that I think they're trying to find ways to address. I will say in my most recent meeting with the Associate Minister, one of the things that he said to me that I found really interesting was that he says, I'm pushing government now for even more, because he says that the department has done a bunch of research on this, and these kinds of longer term events, the stress levels for employees, particularly in government positions, I'm thinking healthcare, other positions, the mental stress crisis actually peaks about 18 months in, or up to 18 months after even. So he says we're still expecting the mental health crisis is going to get worse rather than better in the short term. So he says, I'm lobbying government for more money. He bemoans the fact that our finance minister is a pretty tough-minded guy, and he's dealing with his own challenges of 40 billion. The amount of money we've had to spend on the overall budget is just too much. Well, it's way more than we take in, so I don't know. So there is an awareness of it. I'm hoping to see that there'll be some additional services provided. Yeah, I don't know what else I should say, what I can say. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not one of those things that can just be answered with a few sentences, right? As you said, it's complicated.
No, for instance, some of the letters I've received, I got a letter the other day from someone in Alberta Health Services. The numbers, they were just sharing information with me. The numbers of security incidents, reportable security incidents by the Central Region Health Department sheriffs is, in the last year, the combined total is more than the previous 6 years combined. So in 1 year, we've got 6 years worth of reportable security incidents, most of that driven by mental health concerns. So I mean, it's huge. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Thank you. There is a policy about that our Alberta Chamber Network will be debating and hopefully adopting at our AGM at the end of May. So once that is done, I will make sure you get a copy of that.
Okay.
And then switching gears again, it's great because we've received very diverse questions today. And so the next one I'll read, and if anybody on the call does have another question that they would like to ask, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll deal with this one first and then probably have time for maybe one or two more. So this one's about biotech, specifically in agriculture is becoming big business and will be necessary to feed our growing population. It's been proven safe and effective, yet many people are hesitant and uninformed about it. What is being done to educate the public about the facts and myths of agricultural biotech? And why is there little emphasis on agricultural science education?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a very valid point. The whole aspect of how food is produced in future years is changing dramatically, and it's a lot of it's very technical science that brings about either incremental improvements or in some cases radical leaps in different areas. So I can make a couple of comments. In spite of all of the criticism that the ATA has put out about the school curriculum, I do believe there's a piece in there about agricultural and food awareness, food knowledge, which is a result of some of the ag industry groups. I'm thinking like beef producers or canola producers or barley, whatever. There's I don't know, a dozen or 15 different ag groups have advocated for that to be included in our educational curriculum, and I think that's important. I will also say that many of those agricultural industry groups have adopted a great deal of effort into starting to recognize that if they don't communicate on these fields, if they don't educate the public about their products and about how they're raised and about what they actually have, somebody else will do it for them and it'll all be negative. So there's a great deal of effort happening by many of those industry groups, and I think a lot of it should come from there. Because they're the people with the real knowledge, truthfully. But at the same time, I do think there's a role for government to play on a broader level. And I think that's something that needs to be shared with, and I think I recall the Ag Minister speaking about this on not just a provincial level, but a national strategy as well. So I think there's some conversation with the feds about how some of that might move forward as well, maybe with some federal granting to help it. But I think it's an important subject and certainly something that's, whoever brought it up, it's a valid question and needs to keep bringing it up so that it's on the awareness of government. So.
Perfect, thank you. And so we do have a question here specific to vaccines. So notwithstanding the federal government's ability to bring vaccines into the country, how are we going to be assured that rural communities such as Lacombe and Ponoka will not lose our share of vaccines to larger urban centers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a fear that maybe isn't grounded in what's actually happening. I mean, there is a shortage everywhere, but there's been a pretty concerted effort to make sure the vaccines get distributed out to the smaller areas. I mean, there's some places a lot more remote than us that have raised the concern and they're getting it. I will say that the vast majority of the vaccine distribution has actually been through the pharmacies. And every community that has a pharmacy should have an opportunity, although there have been some pharmacies, and I've actually had communications with a couple of local pharmacies that are in this boat that haven't received an allocation. And so that is a concern. This was raised in caucus just the other day as well, that we make sure that this is brought out so that there is an equitable distribution of the vaccines. And I do know that this is, how do I say, being managed or administered through the minister's office, not Alberta Health Services. So just to get Alberta Health Services off the hook on this one, if this is messed up a little bit, it's not Alberta Health Services' fault. It's been worked out with the minister's office through the Alberta Pharmacies Association, and they have a role in some of it, although I'm not sure how much of it is the actual pharmacy group themselves versus the minister's office. Those details I don't know the answer to. But it is something that we're aware of that has been raised, and I can assure you rural MLAs will continue to make sure their voice is heard on that to make sure that it becomes available. I think the bigger thing that bothers me is we've been hearing this all along, and quite frankly, I get these emails and these letters. There's two issues here. There's an anti-vaxxer thing out there that seems to be growing, and the media continually pushing the fear factor over some of the vaccines, over very remote possibilities of some difficulties, has caused a lot of people to just, quite frankly, say, I'm not going to get it, which is a bigger problem. I heard on the radio this morning, Fort McMurray has one of the biggest outbreaks in the province at the moment, and yet only 14% of their people have gone for a vaccination compared to much higher elsewhere in the province. They interviewed a few people and their response was, well, I'll wait and see how it turns out for other people before I'm going to get it. So I think the bigger challenge is overcoming the resistance to it. And I'll say I've had mine, just so everybody knows. That's the biggest challenge, though, helping us overcome the fear, the resistance, the misinformation that's out there, that causes people to just say, I'm not going.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And okay, two more quick ones here. Question about Bill 66 and wondering what kind of changes that's going to bring. And then also whether or not the Alberta government is advocating that the Alberta-BC border gets reopened. So if you want to talk about both briefly, or if you want to pick one or the other.
Well, the border one, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that'll open at some point. We're not gonna. We can't tell BC what to do.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is more complex. Bill 66. There's been some horrible misinformation pushed out about that. I'm going to be blunt and say that a certain organization in this province finds that by stating things that are in to their benefit, they're able to do a lot of fundraising and raise a lot of money over it. That some of that's coming from there. The worst accusation I've heard is that Bill 66 gives more power to the chief medical officer, which is completely bizarre. What Bill 66 actually does is rolls back what was considered by many people to be too much power for the provincial cabinet, for government. So we've withdrawn some of those powers. We've taken away the ability of ministers within their jurisdictional envelope to be able to, through executive order, change issues for COVID and roll it back to the full normal process. If taking away power from government gives the chief medical officer more power, then that's just a stretch of the imagination. There isn't a thing in that bill that says the chief medical officer is getting more power for anything, and that's the short part of that story. So we've rolled back some of the powers of government that people thought were too strong, and limited the power of government during a pandemic, and that's what the bill does.
Perfect. And then I just have one other quick one here. You talked a little bit about essential versus non-essential in your opening comments, but just more specifically, if further restrictions are put in place that would mean small businesses have to be closed, would big box stores be limited to what they can sell? So the essential items versus non-essential.
Yes, that's taken place in other provinces. Yes, I think our government understands that has to be how it is. We cannot give them an unfair playing field. And I, for one, absolutely would be very vocal about the fact that if they're open for essential stuff, the other aisles have to be taped off and non-accessible. That would be my position, and I think the government would be in the same place.
Interesting. Well, I think that basically wraps up all the questions that we had in advance, and I think that was a very enlightening conversation. We certainly appreciate your time and also your efforts on an ongoing basis with your team and in the legislature, and just want to, you know, continue to encourage everyone that, you know, obviously Ron is very approachable. He's more than willing to talk to businesses specifically about concerns, as are we as chambers, myself and Stacy and Heather in Ponoka. We are your resources and your connectors, and so we encourage you to reach out to us as well. And Stacy just sent me a little note. Yes, thank you for the reminder. We did want to make the recording available. I started recording after Ron's presentation and when we started asking questions, because I just completely forgot. So that's the honest truth. But all the conversation with the questions specifically will be made available. I think the three of us are going to distribute it just through our newsletters, through our normal channels. So it won't be posted online, but if you would like the link, just get in touch with me and I will provide that for you. So thanks everyone for your time today, and we hope you all stay well and hope to see you in person sometime soon.
And thanks, Monica. And I'll just say, if anybody does have a specific issue they need help with, please don't hesitate to call my office. There's all kinds of people on social media who just want to rant and want to just talk about politics, and I don't necessarily respond to all of those. But if you have a specific government issue that needs help with the department, that's what I'm here for. My staff will help you. I will help you. I got one today I just got that I'm going to work for somebody this afternoon on. Please contact me if I can help you with any detailed issues. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ron.
Yep, you're welcome.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.